Lena Harper lived a simple life in a quiet neighborhood where nothing exciting ever seemed to happen. Her days were filled with routines, working as a librarian, taking long walks, and enjoying the peace that came with living far away from the chaos of big cities. But even in such a calm place, there were always little things that caught her attention. And lately, one particular thing had been bothering her. Her neighbor, Margaret. Margaret was an older woman who lived alone in a big Victorian-style house at the very end of the street. The house itself stood out because it looked like it belonged in another time. Its dark wooden panels, tall windows, and intricate designs gave it a mysterious charm. Most people would say it added character to the neighborhood, but Lena couldn't help feeling uneasy whenever she passed by. Something about the house, and Margaret, felt different, almost secretive. Margaret rarely left her home. If anyone ever saw her, it was usually late in the evening when she stepped into her garden to water the plants or tidy up the flower beds. She didn't talk much to anyone, not even during the occasional block parties the neighbors organized. When they did exchange greetings, Margaret's responses were polite but distant, as if she wanted to keep everyone at arm's length. Over time, most people stopped trying to get close to her. They figured she liked her privacy and decided to respect it. But Lena wasn't like most people. She had a natural curiosity about the world around her, and Margaret's guarded demeanor only made her more intrigued. What was hiding behind those closed doors? Why did Margaret always seem so withdrawn? There were rumors, of course. People whispered about how Margaret was a widow, though no one really knew much about her late husband. Some said he died years ago, while others claimed he disappeared under strange circumstances. No one could agree on anything, which only fueled Lena's desire to find out the truth. One evening, as Lena took her usual walk with her dog, Max, she noticed something unusual. As they approached Margaret's house, she saw a sleek black car parked right outside. It wasn't the kind of vehicle you'd expect to see in their modest neighborhood. This was a luxury car, the type driven by wealthy executives or celebrities. Lena slowed down, pretending to let Max sniff around the bushes while she stole a glance at the scene unfolding before her. A man stepped out of the car. He was tall and well-dressed, wearing a perfectly tailored suit that screamed money and power. His hair was neatly combed, and his posture exuded confidence. Lena recognized him immediately. It was William Carter, a billionaire known for his philanthropic work and cutting-edge technology ventures. His name often appeared in news articles and magazines, and his face was familiar from countless interviews. What on earth was someone like him doing here, visiting Margaret? Her heart raced as she tried to make sense of what she was seeing. William rang the doorbell, and after a moment Margaret opened the door. From where Lena stood, she couldn't hear their conversation, but she watched closely as they exchanged a few words. Margaret's expression remained unreadable, though Lena thought she detected a flicker of unease in her eyes. Whatever they were discussing, it clearly wasn't casual small talk. Max tugged at his leash, pulling Lena back to reality. Realizing she was staring, she quickly turned away and continued walking. But her mind was buzzing with questions. What connection could Margaret possibly have to someone like William Carter? Was this visit related to her husband? And why did everything about Margaret feel so off? That night, Lena lay awake in bed, replaying the events in her head. She couldn't shake the image of the black car and the confident billionaire standing on Margaret's doorstep. Something significant was happening, and she was determined to figure it out. Maybe it was none of her business, but Lena had always believed that curiosity was a good thing. After all, sometimes asking questions led to discovering truths that changed lives. The next morning, Lena decided to do a bit of digging. She started by talking to some of her neighbors, hoping someone might know more about Margaret's past. Mrs. Thompson, an elderly woman who lived 2 houses down, mentioned hearing stories about Margaret's husband being involved in some sort of government project years ago. He worked on secret stuff, Mrs. Thompson said vaguely. At least that's what people used to say. Intrigued, Lena went online to search for information. She typed Richard Steele into a search engine, assuming that was Margaret's husband's name based on snippets she'd heard. To her surprise, she found several old newspaper articles mentioning a man named Richard Steele. According to the reports, he had been part of a classified aerospace program during the Cold War era. Details were scarce, but there were hints of groundbreaking research and controversial experiments. One article even suggested that Richard's work had sparked debates within scientific circles, though no specifics were provided. As Lena scrolled through the results, she stumbled upon something even stranger. Despite numerous mentions of Richard's contributions to the program, there was no official record of his death, no obituary, no funeral announcement, nothing. It was as if he had simply vanished without a trace. This discovery sent chills down Lena's spine. How could someone vanish completely? Had something happened to him? Or had he chosen to disappear for reasons unknown? The more Lena read, the more convinced she became that there was a story here, a story that needed to be uncovered. Over the next few days, Lena kept a closer eye on Margaret's house. She noticed subtle changes in Margaret's behavior. For instance, she seemed more restless than usual, pacing back and forth near her window late at night. Occasionally, Lena spotted unfamiliar cars parked outside the house, though none as flashy as William Carter's. Each sighting deepened her suspicion that Margaret was hiding something important. One afternoon, while running errands at the local grocery store, Lena ran into Margaret by chance. Normally, Margaret would nod politely and move on, but this time she paused and struck up a conversation. "I saw you walking your dog the other day," Margaret said, her voice soft but steady. "You're very observant, aren't you?" Lena blinked, caught off guard. "Oh, I suppose so," she replied hesitantly. "It's hard not to notice when something unusual happens." Margaret smiled faintly, though her eyes betrayed a hint of sadness. "Yes, unusual things do tend to happen around here," she admitted cryptically. Then, after a brief pause, she added, "That man who visited me, he's an old acquaintance. We were discussing matters from long ago." "What kind of matters?" Lena asked, unable to resist probing further. Margaret hesitated, then shook her head. "It's complicated," she said. "Things best left in the past." Though disappointed, Lena didn't push the issue. Instead, she thanked Margaret for the chat and continued shopping. But as she pushed her cart down the aisles, her thoughts raced. Complicated matters? Best left in the past? Every word Margaret spoke seemed carefully chosen, as if she were guarding a secret too dangerous to share. By the time Lena returned home, she felt more determined than ever to uncover the truth. Whatever Margaret was hiding, it was clear that she wasn't ready to reveal it willingly. That meant Lena would have to piece together the puzzle herself, one clue at a time. Little did she know, this journey would take her far beyond her quiet neighborhood and into a world of secrets, lies, and unimaginable revelations. After her brief conversation with Margaret at the grocery store, Lena couldn't stop thinking about what she'd said. Those few cryptic sentences, complicated matters, things best left in the past, kept replaying in her mind like a broken record. She wanted to respect Margaret's privacy, but her curiosity was growing stronger every day. There was something about the way Margaret spoke, something unspoken beneath her careful words, that made Lena feel certain there was more to the story. That evening, after finishing dinner, Lena sat down at her computer with a steaming cup of tea. She decided to dig deeper into Richard Steele's history, hoping to find clues that might shed light on Margaret's secrets. Using the information she'd already gathered, she searched for any mention of his work or personal life. It didn't take long before she stumbled upon another article, this one buried deep in an archive. The headline read, "Cold War Scientist Vanishes Without Trace." The article described how Richard Steele had been working on classified projects for the government during the height of the Cold War. According to the report, he was part of a team developing advanced propulsion systems, technology so cutting-edge that it could potentially change the future of space exploration. However, the project was shrouded in secrecy, and very little was known about its true purpose. What intrigued Lena most was a quote from an unnamed source claiming that Richard's research had sparked heated debates among top officials. Some believed his work held enormous potential, while others feared the dangers it posed. But the real shock came when Lena scrolled further down the page. The article mentioned that Richard hadn't officially died. He had simply disappeared. No body was ever found, no accident reported, nothing. It was as if he had vanished into thin air. Lena leaned back in her chair, her heart pounding. Could it be possible that Richard was still alive somewhere? And if so, why would Margaret act as though he were dead? As she continued reading, Lena discovered fragments of other stories linked to Richard's disappearance. One theory suggested that he had gone into hiding to protect himself or someone else from powerful enemies. Another hinted at a cover-up orchestrated by those who wanted to keep his discoveries under wraps. None of these theories were confirmed, but they painted a picture of a man caught in a web of intrigue and danger. Lena spent hours poring over the articles, making notes and piecing together what little information she could find. By the time she finally closed her laptop, her head was spinning with questions. Who exactly was Richard Steele? What had he been working on? And why did everyone seem so determined to erase him from existence? The next morning, Lena decided to pay Margaret another visit. She wasn't sure how much Margaret would tell her, but she figured it wouldn't hurt to try. Armed with a friendly smile and a fresh batch of cookies she'd baked earlier that day, Lena walked up to Margaret's house and knocked gently on the door. To her surprise, Margaret answered almost immediately. She looked surprised to see Lena standing there, but quickly invited her inside. "Come in," she said softly, stepping aside to let her guest enter. "What brings you here?" "I just wanted to check in," Lena replied, holding out the plate of cookies. "I hope you don't mind. I baked some yesterday and thought you might enjoy them." Margaret accepted the gift with a grateful nod. "Thank you, dear. That's very kind of you." They settled into the living room where Margaret gestured for Lena to sit on the couch while she took her usual spot in the armchair. The room was cozy, filled with the scent of lavender and old books. Lena noticed a small stack of photographs on the coffee table, one of which showed a younger Margaret standing beside a man who bore a striking resemblance to the descriptions of Richard Steele. "You mentioned the other day that you and that man, the one who visited you, were discussing matters from long ago," Lena began cautiously. "I can't help but wonder, does it have anything to do with your husband?" Margaret froze for a moment, her fingers gripping the edge of the armrest. Then she sighed deeply, as if resigning herself to the inevitable. "Yes," she admitted, quietly. "It does." For a long moment, neither of them spoke. Lena waited patiently, giving Margaret time to gather her thoughts. Finally, Margaret picked up one of the photographs and handed it to Lena. "This is Richard," she said, her voice trembling slightly. "He was a brilliant man. Too brilliant for his own good, perhaps." Lena studied the photo closely. Richard looked handsome and confident, with sharp features and a warm smile. He seemed like the kind of person who could charm anyone he met. But there was also something intense about his gaze, as if he carried the weight of the world on his shoulders. "He worked on important things," Margaret continued, her tone distant, "things that weren't meant to be shared with the public. At first I didn't understand what he was doing, it was all so complicated. But over time I realized how dangerous it was. People were watching him, following him. They didn't trust him." "Who were these people?" Lena asked, leaning forward slightly. Margaret hesitated, then shook her head. "I don't know exactly. Government agents maybe, or someone else entirely. All I know is that one day he told me he had to leave. He said it was the only way to keep us safe, and then—" Her voice trailed off, and tears welled up in her eyes. "And then he was gone." Lena felt a pang of sympathy for Margaret. She couldn't imagine what it must have been like to lose someone so suddenly, especially under such mysterious circumstances. "Did you ever hear from him again?" she asked gently. "No," Margaret replied, shaking her head. "Not directly, but sometimes I think he's still out there. Watching over me, maybe." Her words sent a chill down Lena's spine. Was it possible that Richard was still alive, secretly keeping tabs on Margaret from afar? Or was this just wishful thinking on Margaret's part? Before Lena could ask more questions, Margaret stood up abruptly. "I've said too much already," she murmured, avoiding eye contact. "Please forgive me. This isn't something I talk about often." Of course," Lena said quickly, rising to her feet. "Thank you for sharing what you did. I really appreciate it." As she left Margaret's house, Lena couldn't shake the feeling that she was closer than ever to uncovering the truth. Margaret's revelations had opened a door, one that led to even bigger mysteries waiting to be solved. And Lena was determined to step through it no matter where it took her. Over the next few days, Lena found herself thinking constantly about Richard and Margaret's story. She replayed their conversation in her mind, analyzing every word Margaret had said. One phrase kept coming back to her. People were watching him. Who were these people, and why had they been so interested in Richard's work? Determined to find answers, Lena decided to reach out to William Carter. She knew it was a long shot. He was a busy billionaire with little reason to care about her amateur investigation, but she figured it was worth a try. After all, he had visited Margaret for a reason, and she suspected he knew more than he let on. Using the contact form on his company's website, Lena sent a polite message explaining her interest in Richard Steele's work and asking if William would be willing to meet with her. To her astonishment, she received a response within hours. William agreed to meet her at a cafe downtown, citing his admiration for Richard's legacy as a reason to help. When the day of their meeting arrived, Lena dressed carefully, choosing an outfit that struck the right balance between professional and approachable. As she entered the cafe, she spotted William immediately. He was sitting at a corner table, sipping a cup of coffee and scrolling through his phone. Up close, he looked even more impressive than he had at Margaret's house. Tall, charismatic, and exuding an aura of confidence. "Miss Harper," he said, standing up to greet her. "Thank you for coming." "Mr. Carter," Lena replied, shaking his hand. "Thank you for agreeing to meet with me." They sat down, and William wasted no time getting to the point. "You're curious about Richard Steele, I assume?" "Yes," Lena admitted. "I've been trying to learn more about him, but there's so much I don't understand. I thought maybe you could help fill in the gaps." William nodded thoughtfully. "Richard was a remarkable man," he said. "One of the brightest minds I've ever encountered. His work on propulsion systems was groundbreaking, years ahead of its time. Unfortunately, it also attracted a lot of unwanted attention." "What kind of attention?" Lena pressed. William hesitated, then leaned in closer. "Let's just say that not everyone appreciated the implications of his discoveries. Some saw them as a threat to national security, to global stability, even to humanity itself. Richard knew the risks, but he believed the benefits outweighed the dangers." "So what happened?" Lena asked, her pulse quickening. "Why did he disappear?" "That's the million-dollar question," William said with a wry smile. "Officially, no one knows. Unofficially—" He paused, choosing his words carefully. "Unofficially, I believe Richard faked his death to protect himself and those he cared about. He went underground, taking his knowledge with him." Lena's mind raced. If Richard was still alive, where was he now? And why had he stayed hidden for so long? Seeing the look of determination on Lena's face, William added, "Be careful, Miss Harper. This isn't a game. The forces at play here are far beyond anything you can imagine. Sometimes the truth is better left buried." Lena couldn't stop thinking about what William Carter had told her during their meeting at the cafe. His words echoed in her mind. Richard faked his death to protect himself and those he cared about. It was both shocking and fascinating. If Richard Steele was still alive, where was he? And why had he stayed hidden for so long? Lena knew she couldn't just let this go. There were too many unanswered questions, too many pieces of the puzzle missing. But how could she find out more? William had warned her to be careful, saying that digging into Richard's past might put her in danger. Still, Lena felt compelled to keep going. She wasn't reckless. She understood the risks. but she also believed that some truths were worth fighting for. Besides, Margaret deserved answers. After decades of living with uncertainty, she had a right to know what really happened to her husband. The first step, Lena decided, was to figure out where Richard's work had taken place. Based on the articles she'd read, it seemed likely that he'd been stationed at some kind of secret facility. Many of the reports mentioned Nevada, specifically areas near military bases or testing sites. Lena reasoned that if she could locate the facility, she might find clues about Richard's disappearance or even evidence that he was still alive. She spent days researching online, combing through old maps and satellite images. Eventually, she came across a lead, a reference to an abandoned research site in the Nevada desert. According to rumors, the facility had been used for experimental projects during the Cold War before being shut down and forgotten. It sounded promising, but getting there wouldn't be easy. The location was remote, and accessing it required special permits or connections. That's when Lena realized she needed help. As much as she wanted to handle this on her own, she knew she couldn't do everything by herself. She thought about reaching out to William again, but hesitated. He'd already given her valuable information, and she didn't want to push her luck. Instead, she decided to assemble a small team of trusted individuals who could assist her without asking too many questions. Her first recruit was Alex Turner, a childhood friend who now worked as a freelance journalist. Alex had always been good at finding obscure details and piecing them together. When Lena explained what she was looking for, he immediately agreed to help. "This sounds like the story of a lifetime," he said with a grin. "Count me in." Next, Lena enlisted Emma Hayes, a tech-savvy engineer who specialized in restoring old equipment. Emma was brilliant when it came to deciphering complex systems, which would come in handy if they found any functioning machines at the facility. Finally, Lena recruited Daniel Brooks, a survival expert who knew how to navigate harsh environments. With Daniel on board, they'd have someone who could handle whatever challenges the desert threw their way. Once the team was assembled, Lena reached out to William one last time. She explained her plan and asked if he'd be willing to fund the expedition. To her relief, he agreed, though he made it clear that he wouldn't accompany them. "I've done my part," he said firmly. "Now it's up to you." With William's financial backing, the group set off for Nevada. The journey was long and grueling, but everyone remained focused on the task ahead. When they finally arrived at the facility, it looked exactly like Lena had imagined. Old, decrepit, and eerily silent. The air smelled of dust and rust, and the only sounds were the wind whistling through the broken windows and the crunch of gravel underfoot. As they stepped inside, Lena felt a mix of excitement and unease. The place was a time capsule, frozen in the era when Richard Steele had worked there. Rows of outdated computers lined the walls, their screens blank and covered in cobwebs. Papers lay scattered across desks, yellowed with age. Faded posters warned employees to maintain secrecy, reminding them that loose lips could sink ships, or worse. "This is incredible," Alex muttered, snapping photos with his camera. "It's like stepping into history." Emma knelt beside one of the machines, inspecting it closely. "Some of these systems might still work," she said. "If we can power them up, we might be able to access old files." Daniel stood watch near the entrance, keeping an eye out for any signs of trouble. "We should hurry," he advised. "This area isn't exactly safe. We don't want to stick around longer than we have to." Lena nodded, feeling the weight of responsibility settle on her shoulders. They had limited time, and every second counted. She divided the group into pairs, assigning tasks based on their strengths. Alex and Emma focused on retrieving data from the computers, while Lena and Daniel explored the rest of the facility. As they moved deeper into the building, Lena noticed a heavy metal door at the end of a narrow hallway. Unlike the other doors, this one appeared newer, reinforced with thick bolts and marked with strange symbols. Her heart raced as she approached it. What could be behind such a secure barrier? "We need to get this open," she said, turning to Daniel. He examined the lock, frowning. "It's not going to be easy. This thing looks designed to withstand a lot." While Daniel worked on the door, Lena wandered back to check on Alex and Emma. They were making progress, having managed to restore power to one of the main terminals. Emma typed furiously, her fingers flying over the keyboard as lines of code scrolled across the screen. "I think I've found something," she announced excitedly. "There are encrypted files here, lots of them. It'll take some time to decode, but I'm pretty sure they're related to Richard's work." Lena peered over her shoulder, trying to make sense of the jumble of numbers and letters. Some of the documents referenced experiments involving propulsion systems, energy, sources, and something else. Something Lena couldn't quite identify yet. Whatever it was, it seemed important. Meanwhile, Daniel called out from the hallway. "I got the door open," he shouted. Lena hurried back to join him, her pulse quickening. Together, they pushed the heavy door open, revealing a dark room beyond. Stepping inside, Lena switched on her flashlight, its beam cutting through the gloom. What she saw took her breath away. The room was filled with prototypes, machines and devices unlike anything she'd ever seen. Some resembled engines, others looked like tools or gadgets. In the center of the room stood a large vault, its surface etched with intricate patterns. A keypad glowed faintly beside it, indicating that it required a code to unlock. "This must be it," Lena whispered, her voice trembling with awe. "This has to be where Richard kept his most important discoveries." Alex joined her, snapping pictures of the vault. "If we can crack this, we might finally get our answers." Emma crouched beside the keypad, studying it carefully. "It's going to take some time," she said, "but I think I can bypass the security system." While Emma worked on the vault, Lena and the others began documenting everything in the AZO room. They photographed the prototypes, cataloged notes left behind, and searched for anything else that might provide clues. Every discovery brought them closer to unraveling the mystery of Richard Steele. Hours passed, and the tension grew thicker with each passing minute. Finally, Emma let out a triumphant cry. "Got it!" she exclaimed, stepping back as the vault clicked open. Inside, they found journals belonging to Richard Steele, along with sketches and blueprints of his inventions. But the most startling item was a small device that emitted a soft, pulsating light. None of them had seen anything like it before. "What is this?" Daniel asked, staring at the glowing object. "I don't know," Lena admitted. "But I think we just found the key to understanding what really happened to Richard." As they packed up their findings and prepared to leave, Lena couldn't shake the feeling that they were on to something huge. The truth was within reach, and she was determined to see it through, no matter where it led. The group gathered around the open vault, their eyes wide with amazement. The glowing device at its center pulsed softly, casting eerie shadows on the walls. It was unlike anything they had ever seen, smooth, metallic, and humming faintly as though alive. Lena reached out hesitantly, her fingers brushing against its surface. It felt warm to the touch, almost inviting, but she quickly pulled her hand back, unsure of what it might do. "This can't be ordinary technology," Emma said, her voice hushed. "It's too advanced. Look at the craftsmanship. It's flawless." Alex flipped through one of Richard Steele's journals, his brow furrowed in concentration. "Listen to this," he said, reading aloud from a page. "If my calculations are correct, this prototype could revolutionize not just propulsion systems, but energy itself. The implications are staggering, but so are the risks." He paused, glancing up at the others. He knew how dangerous this was. That's why he hid it here. Lena nodded slowly, piecing things together. Richard didn't disappear because he wanted to abandon Margaret. He disappeared because he was protecting her and everyone else from whatever this thing is. Daniel stood near the doorway, keeping an eye on the corridor outside. "We need to focus," he reminded them. "This place isn't safe. If someone finds out we're here, we're not leaving until we know more." Lena interrupted firmly. She turned to Emma. "Can you figure out what this device does?" Emma hesitated, then nodded. "I'll try, but it's going to take time. This isn't like anything I've worked on before." As Emma began examining the device, Lena and Alex sifted through the rest of the contents of the vault. Alongside the journals and blueprints, they found photographs, letters, and even audio recordings stored on old tapes. Each item seemed to offer another piece of the puzzle, painting a clearer picture of Richard's life and work. One letter caught Lena's attention. It was addressed to Margaret, written in Richard's neat handwriting. Her hands trembled as she unfolded it and began to read. "My dearest Margaret, I wish I could tell you everything, but I can't risk putting you in danger. What I've discovered has the power to change the world, but it also has the power to destroy it. I've made enemies, people who will stop at nothing to get their hands on my work. Leaving you is the hardest thing I've ever done, but it's the only way to keep you safe. Please forgive me. Yours always, Richard." Tears welled up in Lena's eyes as she finished reading. For decades, Margaret had believed her husband was dead, when in reality, he had sacrificed everything to protect her. The weight of that knowledge hit Lena hard. She couldn't imagine living with such uncertainty, never knowing whether the person you loved was truly gone or simply unreachable. Alex noticed her reaction and leaned over to see what she was holding. "What is it?" he asked gently. Lena handed him the letter without saying a word. As he read it, his expression softened. "This changes everything," he murmured. "Margaret deserves to know the truth." While Lena and Alex continued exploring the documents, Emma focused on deciphering the glowing device. After several hours of careful analysis, she finally spoke up. "I think I understand part of it," she said, her voice tinged with both excitement and unease. "It's some kind of energy converter, capable of harnessing power from sources we don't fully understand yet. But there's something else, something embedded in its core." "What do you mean?" Daniel asked, stepping closer. Emma pointed to a small compartment on the side of the device. "There's a chip inside. It looks like it contains data, possibly instructions, maybe even a message." Without wasting another moment, Emma retrieved a portable scanner from her bag and connected it to the device. The screen flickered to life, displaying lines of code that scrolled rapidly. Slowly, the code translated into readable text and images. The team watched in stunned silence as fragments of information appeared: a map, coordinates, and a series of symbols they didn't recognize. "It's a location," Alex said, pointing to the map, "somewhere overseas." Lena studied the coordinates closely. "Do you think this is where Richard went after he disappeared?" "It's possible," Emma replied. "Whoever built this device must have left clues for anyone trying to follow in their footsteps." As they discussed the discovery, Lena felt a surge of hope. If these coordinates led them to Richard, they might finally be able to bring closure to Margaret, and perhaps to Richard himself. But getting there wouldn't be easy. Traveling overseas required resources, planning, and caution. They would need help and protection. That evening, the group returned to their makeshift camp outside the facility. Sitting around a small fire, they debated their next move. "We can't just rush into this blindly," Daniel warned. "If Richard's enemies are still out there, they'll be watching for anyone who tries to pick up where he left off." "I agree," Lena said. "But we can't ignore what we found. If Richard is still alive, we owe it to him, and to Margaret, to find out." After much discussion, they decided to reach out to William Carter again. Though he had chosen to stay out of the field work, his connections and resources could prove invaluable. Lena sent him a detailed message explaining their findings and asking for assistance in tracking down the location indicated by the coordinates. To their relief, William responded promptly. "You've uncovered more than I expected," he wrote. "I'll arrange transportation and secure clearance for your team. But remember, discretion is key. Trust no one outside our circle." With William's support secured, the group prepared for the next phase of their journey. Over the next few days, they packed supplies, reviewed their plans, and rehearsed contingency strategies in case something went wrong. Lena spent hours poring over the journals and recordings, searching for any additional clues that might guide them. One entry in particular stood out. They call it Project EOS. Its purpose is twofold: to unlock new frontiers of science and to safeguard humanity's future. but trust is scarce among those who seek to control it. If you're reading this, you must proceed with caution. Not everyone shares my vision. The phrase Project EOS sent shivers down Lena's spine. Whatever it was, it clearly played a central role in Richard's work and his disappearance. She made a mental note to ask William about it once they were safely overseas. Finally, the day of departure arrived. Under the cover of darkness, the team boarded a private jet arranged by William. As the plane soared into the night sky, Lena stared out the window, her mind racing. They were heading into uncharted territory, chasing answers that could alter lives or endanger them. Yet despite the risks, she felt a sense of purpose stronger than ever before. Hours later, they landed at a remote airstrip in Eastern Europe. From there, a convoy of vehicles awaited them, ready to transport them to the final destination marked by the coordinates. As they drove through rugged terrain, the landscape grew increasingly desolate. Mountains loomed in the distance, their peaks shrouded in mist. The air was cold and biting, a stark contrast to the heat of the Nevada desert. When they finally reached the site, Lena felt a chill run down her spine. Before them stood a heavily fortified compound, surrounded by high walls and guarded by armed patrols. It looked impenetrable, but Lena knew better. Somewhere within those walls, Richard Steele was waiting. "Are you ready?" Daniel asked, his voice low. Lena took a deep breath and nodded. "Let's finish this." Together, the team moved forward, determined to uncover the truth and reunite a widow with the man she thought she'd lost forever. The compound was more heavily guarded than Lena had anticipated. Armed men patrolled the perimeter, their movements methodical and precise. Cameras scanned every inch of the area, leaving no blind spots. Breaking in undetected would be nearly impossible. But giving up wasn't an option. Lena and her team huddled behind a cluster of rocks, observing the scene through binoculars. "This is insane," Alex muttered under his breath. "There's no way we can get past all those guards." "Have to try," Lena replied firmly. "Richard's in there, I know it." Emma adjusted the straps of her backpack, which contained tools they'd brought for bypassing security systems. "If we can disable the cameras temporarily, we might be able to slip inside unnoticed, but we'll need a distraction." Daniel nodded, already formulating a plan. "Leave that part to me. I'll create some noise on the far side of the compound to draw them away." While Daniel prepared for his role, Emma worked on hacking into the surveillance system using a portable device she'd built specifically for this mission. Her fingers flew across the keyboard as lines of code scrolled across the screen. After several tense minutes, she let out a soft sigh of relief. "Got it. The cameras will loop their footage for the next 10 minutes. That's our window." "Let's move," Lena whispered, signaling for everyone to follow her lead. As they approached the compound, Daniel veered off toward the opposite side, carrying a small explosive charge designed to make noise rather than cause harm. A loud bang echoed through the night moments later, followed by shouts from the guards as they rushed to investigate. Seizing the opportunity, Lena, Alex, and Emma slipped through the now vulnerable entrance. Inside, the compound was eerily quiet, save for the hum of machinery and the occasional flicker of lights. They moved cautiously, sticking to the shadows, as they navigated narrow hallways lined with locked doors. Each step felt heavier than the last, the weight of uncertainty pressing down on them. Finally, they reached what appeared to be the heart of the facility, a large underground chamber filled with advanced technology. Glowing monitors displayed streams of data, while holographic projections floated in midair depicting intricate designs and calculations. At the center of the room stood a man, his back turned to them as he studied one of the projections. Lena froze, her breath catching in her throat. Though his hair was streaked with gray and his face bore the marks of time, there was no mistaking him. It was Richard Steele. "Richard," she called out softly, her voice trembling. He turned slowly, his expression shifting from surprise to wariness. For a moment, no one spoke. Then, recognition dawned in his eyes as he took in Lena's presence and the others behind her. "Who sent you?" he asked, his tone cautious but not unkind. "It's Margaret," Lena said quickly. She doesn't know you're alive. She thinks you're gone. At the mention of Margaret's name, Richard's shoulders sagged, as if the weight of years suddenly crashed down on him. "Margaret," he murmured, his voice thick with emotion. "How is she?" "She's holding on," Lena replied carefully, "but she deserves to know the truth. You owe her that much." Richard sighed deeply, running a hand through his graying hair. "You don't understand. I didn't choose this life. I was forced into it. If I'd gone back, they would have used her against me, used both of us." "We know about your work," Emma interjected gently, "about Project EOS, and we know why you disappeared. But hiding isn't the answer anymore." Richard studied them for a long moment, weighing their words. Finally, he nodded. "Maybe you're right. Maybe it's time I faced the consequences of my choices." Before they could discuss further, alarms blared throughout the compound. Red lights flashed overhead, bathing the room in an ominous glow. "They've discovered the breach," Alex said urgently. "We need to leave. Now." Richard hesitated, glancing around the room at the equipment and data he'd spent decades protecting. "I can't leave all this behind. It's too important." "You don't have a choice," Lena insisted, grabbing his arm. "If you stay here, you'll never see Margaret again. Is that what you really want?" The urgency in her voice seemed to break through his hesitation. With a final glance at the chamber, Richard nodded. "All right, let's go." The group retraced their steps, moving as quickly and quietly as possible. The sound of footsteps echoed behind them, growing louder as the guards closed in. Daniel met them halfway, having successfully evaded capture after setting off the initial distraction. "They're on to us," he warned. "We need to hurry." Together, they raced toward the exit, dodging patrols and narrowly avoiding detection. Just as they reached the outer wall, gunfire erupted behind them. Bullets ricocheted off the metal barrier, forcing them to duck for cover. "This way," Daniel shouted, leading them to a hidden tunnel he'd discovered during his reconnaissance. They scrambled inside, the narrow passage barely wide enough to accommodate them all. As they emerged on the other side, the cool night air hit their faces like a blessing. Their escape vehicle, a rugged Jeep, was parked nearby, its engine idling. Without hesitation, they piled in, with Daniel taking the wheel. Tires screeched as they sped away from the compound, leaving clouds of dust in their wake. For a while, no one spoke, each lost in their own thoughts. Lena glanced at Richard, who sat silently in the back seat, staring out the window. His expression was unreadable, but she could see the turmoil in his eyes. Decades of isolation and sacrifice had taken their toll, yet beneath it all, she sensed a spark of hope, a longing for redemption. When they finally reached a safe location, a secluded cabin arranged by William, they gathered around a table to regroup. Richard listened intently as Lena explained everything they'd uncovered, from Margaret's loneliness to the discoveries in the Nevada facility. By the time she finished, tears glistened in his eyes. "I've made so many mistakes," he admitted quietly. "But if there's still a chance to make things right." "There is," Lena assured him. "Margaret loves you, she always has. All she wants is to see you again, to know that you're okay." Richard nodded, resolve hardening in his gaze. "Then let's do this. Let's give her the truth, and maybe find a way to heal the wounds I've caused." With renewed determination, the group began planning the final leg of their journey, reuniting Richard with Margaret. It wouldn't be easy. There were still enemies lurking in the shadows, determined to keep his secrets buried. But Lena knew one thing for certain: love and truth had the power to overcome even the darkest obstacles. And so, with hearts full of hope, they set off once more, ready to change two lives forever. The journey back home was long, but no one complained. Every mile brought them closer to Margaret, and to the truth that had been buried for so many years. Lena couldn't stop thinking about how this reunion would unfold. Would Margaret forgive Richard? Could they rebuild what had been lost? These questions weighed heavily on her mind, but she tried to focus on the positives. They were giving Margaret answers, closure, and maybe even a second chance at happiness. When they finally arrived in their quiet suburban neighborhood, Lena insisted on going ahead to prepare Margaret for the surprise. She didn't want Richard to simply show up unannounced. This moment needed care and thoughtfulness. Taking a deep breath, she walked up to Margaret's house and knocked gently on the door. Margaret opened it almost immediately, her face lighting up slightly when she saw Lena. "Hello, dear," she said warmly. "What brings you here?" "I need to talk to you," Lena replied, stepping inside. "It's important." Margaret's smile faded as she noticed the seriousness in Lena's tone. "Is everything all right?" Lena hesitated, unsure of how to begin. Then she decided to just say it. "It's about Richard." At the mention of his name, Margaret stiffened. Her eyes widened, and for a moment, she looked like she might faint. What do you mean?" she whispered. "He's alive, Margaret," Lena said softly. "He's been alive all these years." Margaret sank into her armchair, shaking her head in disbelief. No, that can't be true. I saw the reports. Everyone said he was gone. They lied." Lena explained gently. "Richard disappeared. To protect you, to keep you safe. He thought it was the only way." Tears spilled down Margaret's cheeks as she struggled to process the news. "Where is he now?" she asked, her voice barely audible. "He's waiting outside," Lena admitted. "But I wanted to tell you first. You deserve to hear the truth before you see him." Margaret covered her mouth with trembling hands, overwhelmed by emotions she hadn't felt in decades. Fear, anger, joy, they all swirled together in a chaotic storm. Finally, after what felt like an eternity, she nodded. "Bring him in," she whispered. Lena stepped outside and signaled for Richard to come forward. He hesitated for a moment, clearly nervous, then slowly approached the house. When he stepped inside, Margaret froze, staring at him as if he were a ghost. For several seconds, neither of them moved or spoke. Then, Margaret broke down completely. Tears streamed down her face as she stood up and took a shaky step toward him. "Is it really you?" she asked, her voice cracking. "It's me," Richard replied, his own voice thick with emotion. "I'm so sorry, Margaret. I never meant to hurt you." Without another word, Margaret threw herself into his arms, sobbing uncontrollably. Richard held her tightly, tears streaming down his own face as he murmured apologies over and over again. It was a moment of raw, unfiltered emotion, one that left Lena and the others standing quietly in the doorway, giving them space to reconnect. Eventually, Margaret pulled back slightly, wiping her eyes. "Why?" she asked, her voice trembling. "Why did you leave me?" Richard sighed deeply, sitting down beside her. "I was working on something dangerous, something powerful. People wanted to use my discoveries for harm. I knew they'd come after me, and anyone close to me. Leaving was the only way I could think of to keep you safe." "But you let me believe you were dead," Margaret cried, her pain evident. "Do you have any idea what that did to me, how lonely I've been?" "I know," Richard said, his voice breaking. "And I hate myself for it. But I promise you, not a day went by that I didn't think about you. Not a single day." Margaret studied his face, searching for sincerity in his eyes. Whatever she found there seemed to soften her anger, though the hurt remained. "You owe me more than apologies," she said firmly. "You owe me the truth, all of it." Richard nodded. "I'll tell you everything. No secrets this time." Over the next few hours, Richard recounted his story in detail. The classified projects, the threats, the decision to fake his death, and the years spent in hiding. Margaret listened intently, asking questions whenever something wasn't clear. Though she still struggled with feelings of betrayal, she began to understand why Richard had made the choices he did. As the evening wore on, the tension between them slowly eased. Margaret's anger gave way to relief, and eventually to forgiveness. By the time they embraced again, it was clear that their bond, though tested, was still strong. Meanwhile, Lena watched from a distance, feeling a mix of pride and satisfaction. She had set out to uncover the truth, and in doing so, she had helped heal a broken relationship. But this wasn't just about Margaret and Richard. It was about something bigger. It was about the power of love, resilience, and the courage to seek answers, even when the path was uncertain. Before leaving, Lena approached Margaret and Richard. "I'm glad I could help," she said softly. "You two deserve to have your lives back." "Thank you," Margaret replied, her eyes shining with gratitude. "We couldn't have done this without you." Richard extended his hand, shaking hers firmly. "You've given us a second chance. We won't forget that." As Lena walked away, she felt a sense of purpose she hadn't experienced before. This journey had changed her, not just because of the secrets she'd uncovered, but because of the impact those secrets had on real people. Margaret and Richard's story reminded her that sometimes the hardest truths were also the most important ones. In the days that followed, news of Richard Steele's reappearance spread quickly, thanks in part to William Carter, who used his influence to ensure the world learned the truth about Project EOS. While some questioned whether the technology should ever be revealed, Richard argued passionately for transparency. "Knowledge isn't dangerous," he told reporters during a rare interview. "It's how we choose to use it that matters." With Margaret by his side, Richard began rebuilding his life. Together, they traveled, shared their story, and advocated for ethical advancements in science. Though scars remained, they faced the future as partners once again. For Lena, life returned to its usual rhythm, but with a newfound passion for seeking justice and uncovering hidden truths. Inspired by Richard's bravery and Margaret's resilience, she vowed to continue fighting for stories that mattered, ensuring no one else suffered in silence. And so, what had started as a simple curiosity about a mysterious neighbor became a tale of redemption, love, and the enduring human spirit. A reminder that even in the darkest times, hope could shine through.